It must be the Penn State brand for a team that's underachieved the last two seasons. They killed it in the 2022 class, and the 23 effort thus far with 14 hard commits, maybe an even step higher. We got Marty Leap on the line, Tim Aiden, of course, from Black Shoe Diaries on SB Nation, our Penn State postgame host right here, the voice of college football as well. Guys, well, I'm going to start with this, Marty, because I think, and you can take this as glass half empty or half full, either way. I think this was the most underachieving team in the nation last year for a really good team. I think they were so much better than 7-6. They had a top 5 defense in the country when everyone was there and working together and healthy. They were just a loaded team. Of course, had issues in the run game, which really hampered the offense. But not to delve too much into 22, the bottom line point is that it's 11 wins and 11 losses the last 2 years. But that being said, they killed it in 22 in the recruiting class with an easily top 10, I think number 6 in the nation. And now number 4 after 14 hard commits. What's working for James Franklin and company?
Yeah, I think what's working most for James Franklin and company is just the ability to get these kids back on campus. I mean, yes, they had that last summer, but it's a little bit different because the 2023 kids, you've been getting them on campus since last summer. And there are a few staffs in the country who kill on-campus visits more than Penn State does. And we're seeing it. You know, last weekend they host TJ Parker, top 100 defensive lineman out of Alabama, and they land him to come out of the visit. And this isn't one of your Southern kids who SEC schools didn't want. No, go look at the Georgia boards. Go look at the Florida boards after Parker committed to Penn State. They were not happy. This was a kid Georgia wanted. This was a kid Florida wanted, and Penn State out-recruited them. And to Penn State's credit, they really have gotten their act together with NIL, which is vital in today's college football, especially in recruiting, to make this happen. But yeah, I don't disagree. They were an underachieving team last season. Now, I do think it comes with a caveat. If Sean Clifford does not get hurt against Iowa, who knows where that season goes, because they were well on their way to blowing Iowa out of the water. They would have beaten Illinois. I feel confident saying they beat the Michigan schools. If Clifford doesn't get hurt last year, there's a real scenario where Penn State's only loss might have been Ohio State. So I don't disagree they're underachieving, but I also think it comes with a bit of a caveat. But to circle back to recruiting, yeah, it's this staff kills with the on-campus visits. We're seeing it now. They have the NIL to throw around, and you have the number 3 class in the country right now by 247 Sports. And in the next few weeks, you might be adding 2, 3, 4 more 4-star prospects, some of which are borderline 5-star prospects to this class. Yeah, it's great to see, because one thing anyone who's listening to the show a lot has listened to Tim and I talk about is the importance of stacking classes. And as hard as it may be to believe, as good as a recruiter as James Franklin is, Penn State has never signed back-to-back top 10 classes under James Franklin. Last year's class, as you mentioned, Mark, number 6 in the country, right there with the 2018 class, or the best class Penn State has ever signed under James Franklin. And this year's class appears to be well on its way to being top 10 again. So it looks like they're finally going to stack those back-to-back top 10 classes. And when you get top 10 classes, you're talking Alabama, Georgia, LSU, Notre Dame, Oklahoma, Clemson. You're talking that territory. You're talking college football playoff level. So I do think that things, even with a subpar season last year, are trending in a good direction for Penn State. And that all goes back to the recruiting trail. And that is a combination of tip of the cap to the coaching staff for how good they are with hosting recruits, and tip of the cap to everybody involved to get NIL to be a big factor for Penn State.
Recruiting seemed to have slowed down. And, we had a bunch of guys who we seemed to be in the mix for, but no one was really popping. And then we saw instances where there's one recruit, Rodney Gallagher, number 2 recruit in Pennsylvania, according to 24/7 Sports, 4-star kid, Pennsylvania. And his mom is a Penn State alum. And he ends up going to West Virginia. West Virginia, to their credit, made him a real sweetheart NIL deal, from my understanding, like well into 6 figures. And, at the time, there's talk about Penn State's behind the 8 ball, and there's concerns that, if they don't get their act together, they're going to risk becoming like a second tier program, being some kind of mid-level Big Ten program, and letting Michigan and even Michigan State, who I should say Michigan State especially has really embraced the whole NIL thing and has landed some big fish recruiting wise as a result. They might otherwise wouldn't have landed, but to risk those teams clearly passing Penn State and being at best like a distant fourth, was a concern. But it seems like from what I've read from people in the know in the last few weeks, the people who are responsible for getting that NIL money flowing at Penn State they're all on the same page. They're all pulling the same direction now. And while I don't think that's everything, it sure has to count for something in this day and age. Now, as Marty said before, what really made the difference though was that big recruiting weekend last weekend when Penn State hosted a ton of visitors, including some guys that they're squarely in the hunt for. One name, Tamir Robinson, 4-star defensive end. He's a guy who's long Penn State long thought to have been in the lead for him, but in recent times, Miami had been nipping hard at his heels, and Virginia Tech was also hanging around too. So to get him back on campus, and apparently from what I've read, I'm sure from Marty's read too and heard, he really hit it off with defensive coordinator Manny Diaz, and it seems to have essentially sealed the deal. He set his commitment date for July 5th, and by all means, all the crystal balls now are pointing towards Tamir Robinson choosing Penn State. The other big name, most defensive guy, is linebacker Tony Rojas. And this is a guy who, just like Robinson, he had long been favoring Penn State. Now this is a kid out of Fairfax, Virginia, which, the DC metro area is a very prime recruiting territory for James Franklin and company. And so getting this kid would be highly important, of course, to keeping that DMV recruiting strong. So they for a long time, they were leaders for him, but then here comes Georgia, mighty Georgia, not, making their pitch to him. And he made a visit down there before the last weekend. And by all accounts, it sounded like Georgia was making up some serious ground and, getting him to at least think a little bit. I mean, I'm not going to say a flip was imminent, but like, not saying that it was imminent that Georgia was going to overtake Penn State as his leader, but they were certainly a threat. And so they got him, he got back on campus and again, hit it off with Manny and the rest of the coaching staff. And that seems to have also sealed the deal. He set I forget what date, maybe you know Marty, but he set a commitment date as well for sometime in early mid-July. And it sounds like, it sounds like he canceled what was going to be another visit to Georgia, which is huge. And so it sounds like they staved off the Bulldogs' late surge there and they're expected to win his commitment next month. I liken it actually to what happened a year ago with Denai Dennis Sutton. Same situation. He was a kid who had long been thought to have had Penn State as his leader. And then, Georgia really made him think long and hard about it. Took a visit down there, loved the place. But in the end, just like of Rojas, that's just like, it was the relationships, the coaching staff, the long-standing relationships that won out for him.
Tony Rojas, the commitment day is July 5th, so it is very close. And I really like the Denai Dennis Sutton comparison. It's one that made a lot. Penn State led the whole way through. Georgia made them really sweat it out, and it looks like in the end those relationships with Penn State are going to win out with Rojas same way they did with Denai Dennis Sutton last cycle. But yeah, July 5th, big day for Penn State. Tony Rojas, who, when his recruitment's all said and done, might be a borderline top 100, maybe even 5-star prospect to linebacker, is going to pick the Nittany Lions. Like you said, Tamir Robinson on July 15th. All signs
got it mixed up.
Penn State. Yeah, no. All signs point towards Penn State. an elite pass rusher out of the Pittsburgh area. And, Virginia Tech made them sweat that one out because of Brent Pry being down there now, but it looks like the Nittany Lions are going to really hit a home run with their linebacker class this cycle with Tony Rojas, Timmy Robinson, and should also mention Dakari Nelson out of Alabama, who's expected to commit to Penn State at some point this summer, 4-star linebacker prospects. So yeah, this could be a really special linebacker class for the Nittany Lions.
I see that in addition to the Alabama defensive lineman that you guys highlighted, that top 100 player, top 10 at his position, 3 other players have committed since mid-May. Anybody in particular, Marty, that you like, that you really like based on the scouting reports you've read and what you've seen on tape?
Yeah, one kid I like a lot is wide receiver Yazid Haynes out of the Eastern PA area. Great athlete, has a deep ball threat, something Penn State's offense could really use. Big body athlete, also could potentially play cornerback for Penn State. I don't think he will. I think he winds up wide receiver, but definitely a kid to watch if you're an Nittany Lion fan. Came to campus, worked out for the staff at a camp setting and just tore the camp up. Was probably the best player at the camp. And anytime a player works out for a staff and is the best player at that camp and they get an offer and commit, those kind of offers usually tend to work out. So yeah, Yazid Haynes is a kid definitely Penn State fans should keep an eye on.
He apparently ran a sub 4.5 40 at the camp.
Yeah, dude's an athletic freak. I think recruiting wise are pretty good. I mean, it might not hurt to mention Trayon Webb real quick. Running back, he's a like borderline top 100 kid of IMG in Florida, who all the crystal ball has been to Penn State in the last week or so. So I might have heard to mention him real quick and probably London Montgomery and in-state running back. But yeah, I think we hit on the running backs real quick. I think we're good recruiting wise.
They also landed just to add Tyreek Blanding.
I didn't think
3-star defensive lineman is a top prospect in New York State according to 24/7 Sports.
Yeah, a lot of comparisons, at least I feel, to him and Adisa Isaac, which is a good group to be in if you're him.
Tim, I'll start with you in regards to once we get to August camp, where are your eyes going to be first and foremost in regards to narrative, storylines, position battles, anything in particular?
I'm going to be looking very carefully at the running backs and the offensive line. Those were 2 biggest sore spots on the offensive side of the ball last year. We've talked about this ad nauseum. I'm kind of sick of saying it, but last year, Penn State did not have one single game of a 100-yard rusher. So I would hope that's not going to be the case this year, especially with Nick Singleton now in the fold and apparently already turning heads in spring practice. And I'm sure he'll do some more turning heads in the fall camp. And hopefully he stays healthy. I'm really excited to see what he's capable of. I wouldn't expect him, obviously, to start against Purdue. I would imagine Kevon Lee is probably the number 1 guy right now at tailback. But I think what'll be nice is him in the fold. I'm hopeful Kevon Lee kind of returns to his roots and sticks to trying to be a north-south runner, which made him so effective in 2020, his true freshman year in 2020. As opposed to last year when he did a little too much dancing around, like trying, thinking that he was like Saquon who could, dance around and then just switch directions so quick that the other guys couldn't adjust. But I'm hopeful Kevon Lee returns to be that north-south guy. And then who knows? You got is this the year Devin Ford finally breaks through and becomes more useful? Keziah Holmes, I don't know. Part of me is a little bit surprised that, he didn't transfer out, but that's a guy who you're kind of thinking now or never with at this point. And then, of course, there's Katron Allen, another classmate of Singleton's who played at IMG Academy. His nickname is Fat Man, but man, he is a big dude who can run. He's not just some guy you throw in there to get you 1 yard, but he can carry piles and pick up several yards. So really just curious to see them. And then, of course, the offensive line. I know better now than to think they're going to be good, but my hope is they can be serviceable. And if they can be serviceable, it'd be a step up from last year, frankly. There's I figure at center, you should have an upgrade with Juice Scruggs being there. No disrespect to Mike Miranda, but I think you're going to see a upgrade in that spot. And you bring in, we talked about Hunter Norzad coming in, transfer from Cornell. He's a guy who's seeking to get drafted in the NFL next spring. So he has a great year at the FBS level. He can go a long way towards that. And I think he's a kid who's got a good chance at earning a starting spot. I believe he's a guard, Marty. But grab one of those starting guard spots. It should be a little more experienced unit overall. Hopefully a deeper rotation. So you just want to see improvements there. On the defensive side of the ball, my eyes are on the linebacker spots because the starting group, it's pretty good, but it's rather thin after that. So, I'm curious to see who maybe steps up, especially amongst the backups. I imagine Curtis Jacobs will be the leader of that group now, his third year playing on the team. And then in the middle, curious to see who takes that spot. There's a Tyler Elsdon. Is it Kobe King? Someone else? And so I'm really just it's a big question mark. Not sure who exactly besides Jake. And frankly, if Jacobs goes down to injury, kind of like the quarterback position last year, you're looking at some potential trouble that happens. I'm pretty confident about the other spots in the defense, especially the secondary. Pretty deep group, but the linebacker unit is my other.
I'm looking at the advanced metrics that are posted here in Athlons. They've got a few numbers here on each team that kind of depict, where the 2021 season went. And yeah, Penn State was 125th in the country in explosive rush plays and 108th in successful rush plays. So, they measure successful rush plays a certain way that if, it's 1st and 10, you get, say, 4 yards, that's a successful run. If it's 3rd and 20, then you can get 19 yards. It's not successful. So there's various measurements of success, and it changes based on down, but it basically measures, how successful the play is, whether it's a pass play or run play. And Penn State was in the bottom 5 in the country in running successfully from scrimmage. So that obviously has to improve.
No, I was going to say, improving the running game will be key this year. Now, like Tim said, I think adding Nick Singleton to the fold to help a lot. And this is something we even talked about this last year on the postgame show, kind of previewing Nick Singleton, was hopefully, and Tim, you touched on this just now with Kevon Lee. If you went to Thunder and Lightning, let Kevon Lee go back to being the Thunder. Give me 3, 4, 5 yards and fall forward. And my hope is with Nick Singleton on the fold, maybe Lee doesn't feel that need to be that home run threat that he might have felt last year. And that could pay off for Penn State. If Lee takes the ball, does what he does best, which is give me 3 yards, run a linebacker over, take an extra yard and a half, fall forward, and let's go. And Nick Singleton's your home run guy. That could really pay off for Penn State. Defensively, I agree. Linebacker is my biggest concern. I think the defensive line and the secondary both be excellent. I think linebacker can be solid if they stay healthy. That's a big if, especially because they only have, 5 or 6 scholarship linebackers at this point. But, yeah, it's the ability's there for Penn State to bounce back this season. I think they will be better than last season. It's just a matter of, go out there in the fields on Saturdays or if against Purdue on a Thursday night, and you got to prove it,
Maybe roll out a 4-2-4, or was it, or 4-2-5 defense.
Yeah, it won't surprise me to see the 4-2-5 as the base, because if you look at Manny Diaz did the Miami and look at Penn State's defense, you have Joey Porter Jr. and Caitlin King as your quarterbacks and Daquan Hardy as your nickelback. They're 3 of your best defensive players anyway. So roll those guys out there with Tig Brown, who else safety, and Curtis Jacobs, and either Kobe King or Tyler Elsdon and Mike as your 2 linebackers. That's probably your best defense anyway. So we got to kind of wait till it shakes out. But, yeah, I won't be surprised at all if we see Penn State run a 4-2-5 as their main base defense this year.
They've got another section here in Athlons where they surveyed head coaches or coaches. I should not make the determination there, but coaches in the Big Ten anonymously. And here's their take on Big Ten. So I'll read a couple sections here and then get your thoughts on what they had to say. Sean Clifford coming back is absolutely huge for them. I know they have his replacement signed, but having him back with that much experience and offensive coordinator Mike Yursich in year 2 is going to be huge for them. They've been really ineffective since Joe Moore had left. They've got to fix the offensive line. They could not run and they could pass protect. That's how they ended up losing that much down the stretch. They've been recruiting well at offensive line and they need immediate results there.
One thing I will add to that I think is kind of funny to me is I feel like, other coaches, national pundits, whoever it is, are higher on Sean Clifford at this point than Penn State fans are. I think a lot of that is Clifford fatigue. Yeah, he's going into his 4th year as a starter, his 6th year on campus. I think it's a lot of Clifford fatigue. I would be the first person to admit I'm probably harder on Clifford than I should be. If you look at last year before Sean Clifford got hurt, he looked like a legitimate, CJ Stroud aside, best quarterback in the conference kind of candidate. And that wasn't due to poor quarterback play. It's just Sean Clifford was playing that well. So I will say that. I also think that the year 2 with Mike Yursich cannot be overstated. This is the first time in his 4 years as a starter he's had the same offense coordinator back-to-back seasons. And Mike Yursich is the best offense coordinator and the best quarterback coach he has had. So I do think that's also worth monitoring and worth mentioning. But, yeah, I think most Penn State fans are in I'll believe when I see it mode with Clifford. But I also won't be surprised if Sean comes out and has a really solid season, 3,000 yards and 30 touchdowns, 5 to 10 interception kind of year, which I feel like every Penn State fan would take. I wouldn't stun me to see him do that, largely because I just believe that much in Mike Yursich as both an offensive coordinator and a quarterback coach.
Next up, they say defensive coordinator Brent Pry leaving is a huge deal because he's been with James Franklin forever. Manny Diaz is going to be really aggressive and press those young guys. It was no shock James grabbed him up. He'll be a head coach on that defense. They've got some nice pieces, especially in the back 7. They'll go single high. They'll blitz. They'll get after it right away.
Yeah, I think I was thinking to myself the other day how the defense of Manny Diaz could be different from Brent Pry, and I don't say any of this to disrespect Brent Pry or to say that Brent Pry was not a great I mean, he was a solid coordinator for Penn State. I mean, there's a reason Virginia Tech picked him up as head coach. Players loved him. He had some pretty solid defenses overall at Penn State. I know 2020 was a bit of a mess, but we can kind of excuse that with COVID. But, in the non-COVID years when he had, a normal offseason to prepare his defense, they usually fared pretty well. I think with Manny, I think what that report said, I'm thinking they'll be a little more aggressive, maybe a little more blitzing than they did under Pry. Not that Pry didn't like blitzing. He did. I guess my hope is the blitzes get home more frequently under Manny. For whatever reason, maybe it could just be my bias or whatever, but it seemed like there were so many times where you saw the pass rush going, whether it was a blitz or the deal, and it would just get there maybe a split second too late. My hope is this time around this year that they'll actually finish and get that sack or before the quarterback can get rid of it. And so that, and I think maybe there'll be you might see some maybe more exotic looks like Martin was talking about 4-2-5 look perhaps, especially given how thin Penn State seems to be at linebacker. Might be the best thing to go towards. And I know Marty and we talked about this on our own show in the past, but you've said in today's college football, it's most important to have a D-line that can pass rush and to have a ball hawking secondary to go with that, as opposed to if you had to choose, you'd pick those over having a deep linebacking core.
All right. Penn State football talk here with Tim Aiden, Marty Lee from Black Shoe Diaries. Appreciate you guys being here as always. Everybody head on over to Black Shoe Diaries. Get yourself ready early here for Penn State football. We're about a month away from Big Ten Media Days. And of course, Tim and Marty are going to have it locked down there, but also here the voice of college football with post game. And that's good news for us. Guys, appreciate you being here as always.
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime, Mark. We always enjoy it.
Sure thing, Mark. Thanks for having us.